Fallout from a restaurant turning away his daughter, and new calls to confront Trump officials and supporters wherever they may be. And a bombshell on the Russia probe from the top Democrat on the Senate Intel Committee, Mark Warner. But is it unraveling? Byron York is here to weigh in on where we are with that. And Ed Henry has new developments tonight on the GOP versus the FBI. Plus, America's Rabbi nabs Roseanne Barr's first interview since her firing from ABC. The rabbi joins us tonight with highlights. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. The Department of Homeland Security clarifying its position on zero tolerance tonight as the president hits hard on illegal immigration at a campaign-style rally. And Democrats call for the agency protecting our borders to be abolished. Plus, some Democrats are working to distance themselves from Congresswoman Maxine Waters' call to confront and force out Trump officials wherever you spot them, including in their private lives. We start tonight, though, with Kristen Fisher and new threats against the Trump administration and its supporters. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Well, the level of incivility on both sides is really growing by the day, but the threats against Department of Homeland Security and especially ICE employees have gotten so bad that a department-wide memo was sent out warning employees to keep their doors and windows locked. And according to ABC News, one DHS official even found a burned and decapitated animal on his front porch right here in D.C.
Stop kidnapping children, you Nazi!
Protesters camped outside the ICE headquarters in Portland, Oregon for over a week. Just got their message amplified thanks to one of the state's congressmen. Earl Blumenauer says it's time to abolish ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, and today he introduced a bill that would do just that. One of the bill's co-sponsors said that, quote, ICE is tearing apart families and ripping at the moral fabric of our nation. As of now, at least 5 Democratic members of Congress are calling for ICE to be abolished. But tonight, at a rally in South Carolina, President Trump defended the agency.
The Democrats don't like ICE. These are great, brave, tough people. These people are much tougher than MS-13. They don't like Border Patrol. They don't like your police. They don't like anybody.
Today, the nation's top border enforcement official acknowledged they've had to abandon the president's zero-tolerance policy towards immigrant families, at least for now, because after the executive order President Trump signed last week, the parents' cases can't be prosecuted since they can't be separated from their kids. But the White House press secretary insists that this reversal is only temporary.
This will only last a short amount of time because we're going to run out of space. We're going to run out of resources in order to keep people together, and we're asking Congress to provide those resources and do their job.
While President Trump ultimately backed away from separating families at the border, he's digging in on his call to get rid of due process for migrants. He said today that anyone who crosses the border illegally should be sent back to their home country without ever going before an American judge.
We want a system where when people come in illegally, they have to go out. And a nice, simple system that works. You know, Mexico holds people for 4 hours, for 5 hours, for 2 hours, and they're gone. We have people for 4, 5, 6 years, and they never leave.
Now, the flip side to that is, of course, Democrats who say that doing that, turning away undocumented immigrants without due process, would be unconstitutional. Shannon.
That fight is far from over. Kristen,
over.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
All right, in less than a week, 2 Trump administration officials have been confronted and verbally assaulted while out to dinner, with protesters paying a follow-up visit to one of their homes. As Kristen reported, a burnt and decapitated animal body was reportedly left on the porch of a senior Homeland Security official. The White House press secretary was asked to leave a restaurant where she was dining with family, and now prominent Democrats are calling for confrontations. And they're backed up by some in the media, like the Washington Post's Jennifer Rubin, who writes, it is not altogether a bad thing to show those who think they're exempt from personal responsibility that their actions bring scorn, exclusion, and rejection. Doug McElway's in Lexington, Virginia, where Sarah Sanders was asked to leave the Red Hen restaurant with the very latest on the controversy. Doug.
A generation ago, it would have been a gross violation of congressional ethics and of simple good manners. A sitting member of Congress, Democrat Maxine Waters, imploring her constituents to banish administration officials from all public places. Quote, if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. And a generation ago, it would have been unthinkable for a president to respond in kind. But Mr. Trump fired back at Waters today. He tweeted, Congresswoman Maxine Waters' extraordinarily low IQ person has become, together with Nancy Pelosi, the face of the Democrat Party. She has just called for harm to supporters. Be careful what you wish for, Max. But the exchange marked another escalation in a week that saw a cascading descent of political civility. Members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus heckled the president in the Capitol building.
Quit separating the kids. They're separating the children.
And a congressional intern hurled an F-bomb at Mr. Trump. The same week, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was shouted out of a D.C. restaurant by aggressive hecklers.
If kids don't eat in peace, you don't eat in peace.
They showed up outside her townhome, too.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi had to abandon her night out at the movies this weekend in the face of a similarly confrontational mob.
If she wants people to protest, that's one thing. But to continue this, they're inciting violence.
And on Friday night, here at the Red Hen restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, 200 miles south of Washington, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was asked to leave because of her political views. Sanders complied. After an employee of the restaurant posted about the incident, Sanders tweeted about the restaurant owner, quote, "Her actions say far more about her than about me." Wilkinson later told the Washington Post, quote, "I'm not a huge fan of confrontation," but she added, "This feels like the moment in our democracy when people have to make uncomfortable actions." The House Majority Leader today appeared to suggest that the Red Hen incident is taking America into uncharted territory.
This is very dangerous. She should apologize to the American public.
She did not apologize, as you saw. She mostly blamed Donald Trump for the rhetorical violence. Meanwhile, here in Lexington, Virginia, people have been dropping off flowers and notes of support for the Red Hen, while others drive by in cars and pickup trucks saying that the Red Hen does not reflect their values, but none of them are speaking to each other. In Lexington, Virginia, Doug McKelway. Shannon, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Well, Congresswoman Maxine Waters tonight denies she said anything that equates to what she claims the president has said about stirring up violence against the opposition. Joining me now, Fox News contributor, former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. Sir, great to have you with us.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Great to be here. And for Maxine Waters to say that she didn't say what she's on camera saying, maybe.
GOP imposed deadline for the FBI and DOJ come and gone. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is here with an update. Hey, Ed.
Shannon, good to see you. New tonight, House Republicans like Mark Meadows are lashing out at Justice Department officials for trying to take a victory lap over the weekend and claiming they had turned over a lot of documents. Meadows and other conservatives are charging, pardon me, the Justice Department has only turned over a small fraction of those documents. Thousands of pages. GOP leaders have demanded literally millions of documents. House Intel Chair Devin Nunes saw his 5 p.m. Eastern Time deadline for the rest of these documents come and go, as you said tonight. He says these documents will raise more questions about how the whole Russia collusion investigation, that the official July 2016 timeline for when the Russia investigation started conflicts with records that suggest the FBI actually began gathering intelligence about the Trump campaign much earlier than publicly admitted. Remember, it was FBI agent Peter Strzok who wrote the memo that opened the Russia probe on July 31st, 2016. We now know from his text messages he wanted to, quote unquote, stop Donald Trump from ever becoming president. Well, the outstanding documents the Republicans want focus on the FBI's alleged use of confidential human sources to start probing the Trump camp before July of 2016. FBI and Justice Department officials have told Congress they believe they have complied with most of the Republican requests, and these questions about human sources have been addressed. Now, the top Democrat on the House Intel panel, Adam Schiff, tonight says, quote, under the guise of oversight, the president's allies continue to seek documents in a pending investigation for the purpose of assisting the Trump legal team, or if the Department of Justice refuses, using that refusal to undermine Mueller's investigation or give the president a pretext to fire Rod Rosenstein, of course, the deputy attorney general. Now, the president claimed just the opposite, tweeting, I have tried to stay uninvolved with the Department of Justice and FBI, although I do not legally have to, because of the now totally discredited and very expensive witch hunt currently going on. But you do have to ask why the DOJ and FBI are not giving over requested documents. Well, Nunes told Fox today he knows why the Justice Department is holding back on documents. He says they're so married to what he called, quote, this Russiagate fiasco, charging that the Democrats and others do not want the public to see that intel was weaponized against the president. Watch.
I think the American people are beginning to see what it is that we've been after for a very long time. And that is it common, or does it ever happen, that the counterintelligence agencies or capabilities of this country, are they used to target political campaigns?
Now, the DOJ responded to Nunes tonight. They wrote in a letter obtained by Axios, quote, many of your requests relate to documents and information regarding issues surrounding confidential human sources that are solely in the custody and control of the FBI. The FBI retains and has the ability to produce the documents requested in a manner consistent with its obligation to protect confidential sources and methods. Now, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, as well as Rosenstein, are now scheduled to testify publicly on the Hill Thursday as this fight only intensifies because, in fact, Peter Strzok is also facing a congressional deposition behind closed doors, Shannon.
All right. Ed Henry, thank you very much. President Trump responding tonight to Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who reportedly joked about revealing new information on the Russia investigation at a fundraiser, telling donors to, quote, buckle up. The president tweeting, why is Senator Mark Warner perhaps in a near drunken state, claiming he has information that only he and Bob Mueller, the leader of the 13 angry Democrats on a witch hunt, knows? Isn't this highly illegal? Is it being investigated? A senior congressional source tells Fox News Senator Warner regrets the glib remark. Let's talk about that and much more with Byron York. He's the chief political correspondent at the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. Byron, great to have you with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Okay, so what do you make of that? I mean, the Democrats have been all over Republicans. They say they've been leaking continuously through these investigations. Some say it was an offhand remark, but you know, anything that happens at these fundraisers behind closed doors, somebody records it or passes it along. I mean, nothing seems to be off the record.
And anything about the Russia investigation people take seriously. And actually, I think the president zeroed in on the issue here, which is there really something that only Mark Warner and Bob Mueller know? What about the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr? Should he know that sort of thing? So maybe this is all a big joke and there's nothing like that. But it does raise that serious question.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about this ongoing battle back and forth, which has gone on for months and months between key House DOJ members, or House members and the DOJ, the FBI, this battle over documents about an informant, that kind of thing. We've got this letter tonight that the Department of Justice has sent back to House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes, saying basically, let me read part of it. It says, your letter asks whether the Department and FBI intend to obey law. We believe that is exactly what the Department and the FBI have been doing as we have been responding to the committee's subpoenas and requests. But there was something else in this letter that caught your attention, too.
Well, the key question in this Nunes letter, and remember Nunes sent a letter demanding stuff last week. The FBI responded at 11:10 p.m. on Friday. Nunes sent him another letter Sunday, said you got to do it by 5 o'clock today, so this is that response. Nunes had asked, did the FBI use informants against the Trump campaign? And if so, how many and how much was spent? And if you look at the FBI's answer, the FBI is, we have responded to your question. Now, does that mean they answered the question? Does that mean they supplied the information? Or does that mean they responded to it? Anyone who's ever filed a Freedom of Information Act request gets a letter back responding to your request. And by the way, we may not answer it, but here's your response. So it's not clear what the Justice Department has actually made public here. Or, excuse me, what had given Nunes.
Okay, so the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, also Adam Schiff, saying that he doesn't think all these documents should be turned over. He says for the purpose of assisting the Trump legal team. So he says basically the Republicans want it so they can feed it to the president and he can use it in his team to defend him.
We've been hearing this a lot from Democrats, saying that much of what the Republicans call oversight, and it's not just the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee is also looking into this. Much of what Republicans are calling oversight is really an effort to help the Trump legal team. But there are a lot of issues in which the Republicans say, look, this is just legitimate oversight.
It's a co-equal branch.
It's a co-equal branch. And Congress can get what it wants if it acts in a united way, by the way, which is why it was important the Justice Department would not give them the time of day.
Yeah, and it sounds like Mark Meadows is saying, who's been another It's next.
We're defending our borders because if you don't have borders, you don't have a country.
Plus, is the liberal rage aimed at President Trump actually having the opposite effect and forging a closer bond between the president and Republicans? Our panel debates that next. And later, he was one of the first statewide elected officials to endorse Donald Trump in 2016. Now the president is returning the favor by campaigning for South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster ahead of a tough primary runoff. Jonathan Seri is live in Columbia tonight to tell us more. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Shannon. In fact, we moved inside because there was a lot of lightning this evening. In fact, a thunderstorm delayed Air Force One's arrival by more than an hour, but President Trump told a friendly crowd of supporters that he was not going to let a little bit of rain cause him to stand up Governor Henry McMaster. Mr. Trump really saw this visit as a way of returning a favor. McMaster was an early supporter of Trump, and the resident wanted to do something in return to help McMaster on the eve of his GOP primary runoff. Speaking to a friendly crowd of more than 1,000 that crammed into a relatively small high school gymnasium, Trump updated some of his usual themes, including the border wall.
We're defending our borders because if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. You don't have a country. Oh, it's happening. That's happening. Well, it's happening. It's not build that wall anymore. It's continue building that wall.
About 60 protesters showed up outside the venue, most of them taking issue with the Trump administration's immigration policy. But inside, the only protests heard were directed at the media, with Trump supporters chanting fake news. The president listed his accomplishments, including creating a roadmap for peace with North Korea and leveling the playing field with America's trading partners.
We are doing so well. We are lifting millions and millions of Americans from welfare to work, from dependence to independence, and from poverty to prosperity.
Trump also recognized the coalition of what he called once forgotten Americans who have now mobilized into a formidable political force. Shannon?
All right, Jonathan Seri, thank you very much on a rainy night in Columbia.
Certainly.
Well, partisan outrage aside, the New York Times suggests there's a level of unity among Republican voters that could help the GOP's chances during the midterms of keeping control of Congress. The headline reads, "Numb to outrage, Republican voters feel deepening bond to Trump." Let's talk about it with tonight's panel. Fox News contributor Doug Schoen, who's also a former advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt, who is also an opinion editor for the Washington Times. Welcome to you, gentlemen.
Great to be with you.
Okay, so let's talk about what we're dealing with here. This is an interesting piece in the New York Times. Jeremy Peters writes this. He says, in interviews across the country over the last few days, dozens of Trump voters, as well as pollsters and strategists, described something like a bonding experience with the president that happens each time Republicans have to answer a now familiar question: how can you possibly still support this man? I mean, Doug, the reports are that these people feel like they are attacked and maligned and disregarded, and that the press is just repeatedly, and the left is just repeatedly proving the president to be truthful about these things when he says they don't care about you.
Well, I would say this. It is certainly the case that the core Trump supporters, about 35% of the electorate, remain strong and react to attacks by becoming emboldened, as the Times said. The problem that the GOP has is that there's more enthusiasm for the Democrats, and with the failure of Congress to get much done, the Democrats have a lead in the generic vote of about 7 or 8 points, and there's an enthusiasm gap, which is actually working now for the Democrats.
Yeah, and Charlie, we've seen a little bit of that in some of these early races and primaries and special elections, that Republicans have been worried about turnout. I mean, the left, the resistance is very passionate. They're very ginned up about what they see as an attack on this country. They're motivated to show up. I mean, what do you think happens come fall?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we've never seen this kind of level of enthusiasm, I think, and Doug is exactly right. This level of enthusiasm, we've seen it in races all over the country on the Democratic side. But when you have stuff going on like, Maxine Waters encouraging these radical leftists to go out and confront administration officials in restaurants and on the street in their homes, when you have things going on like happened in Lexington, Virginia, where Sarah Huckabee Sanders is run out of the restaurant because she works for Trump, when you have these kinds of appalling scenes, all of that, and I'm sure that it makes, and it has a lot to do with social media, because in social media, when you pull off some stunt like this, you get all this praise on social media. But in terms of mainstream, regular, independent voters, when they see this stuff, it turns them off and it runs them into the arms of Donald Trump. So it's not just Republicans sort of lining up behind him in a constructive way. It's those independent voters who, maybe they don't like Trump, maybe they don't like everything he says, but they sure like him a heck of a lot more than they like when they, of these radical leftists who are making scenes everywhere.
I want to ask you both for a quick reaction to the same statement. David French, writing in NRO, saying this: make no mistakes, this is provocative rhetoric. Angry, in-your-face confrontations dramatically increase the chances of violence, put people in close proximity. Yelling and spitting, and public officials will rightly start to fear that they're in physical danger. Doug, quickly you, and then Charlie.
Well, look, David is right. We don't need the kind of rhetoric we're getting from Maxine Waters. I say that as an American and a patriot first, Democrat second. And I think the Democrats would do better to articulate a different program than confrontation. But we need compromise on both sides. We're not getting it. I would love to see the immigration issue, for example, resolved with a compromise to build the wall and do DACA. Sadly, all we're getting is confrontation, which does increase the level of conflict and indeed possibly violence.
Quick final comment from you, Charlie.
French is exactly right, but it's also something we've already seen. We saw it with the congressional baseball practice last year, and it would do everyone a lot of good to tone it down a little bit.
Well, and we have had a number of Democrats step up and say today that they absolutely do not endorse that message. So it's been comforting, I think, for folks on both sides of the aisle to hear that. All right, Doug and Charlie, great to have both of you with us.
Good night.
All right, is this what they mean by California Dream? And a young woman they're calling Permit Patty calls police on an 8-year-old selling water. Trace is here to fact check, make some sense of this for us. And we're going to hear Roseanne's first interview since she was fired by ABC.
I am not a racist. I'm an idiot. I am willing to accept whatever consequences this brings because I know I've done wrong.
The man who did that interview, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, joins us live next. Another day, another California controversy in a state where dicey altercations appear to be happening on a weekly basis. California has Barbecue Becky, Jogger Joe, and now Permit Patty. But most importantly, they've got Trace Gallagher, and he's on the case for us tonight. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. The family of 8-year-old Jordan Rogers says she was selling water because her mom recently got laid off and she was trying to raise money for a trip to Disney. The woman who tried to shut down the water sale is Allison Edel, but as you say, social media has now dubbed her Permit Patty. And here's the controversial video. Watch.
This woman don't want to let a little girl sell some water. She calling the police on an 8-year-old little girl. You can hide all you want. The whole world gonna see you, boo.
Yeah, and illegally selling water without a permit? Yeah.
On my property.
It's not your property.
You heard the mom say the whole world was going to see it. Well, she had a point. The video has now been shared more than 8 million times on Twitter and Instagram, and some believe Allison Edel's behavior smacks of racism. But on the Today Show, Edel said it wasn't about race, it was about noise. Watch.
And I said, please, I'm trying to work. You're screaming, you're yelling, and people have open windows. It's a hot day. Can you please keep it down?
Edel said she didn't actually call police, which is true, and she also apologized, but the little girl's mom did not accept the apology. Edel claims she's getting hate mail and death threats. She, by the way, is also getting parodied by Saturday Night Live cast members and compared to Barbecue Becky. That's the Oakland, California woman who called police on a black man who was apparently grilling where it wasn't allowed. Social media also called that racially motivated. The woman denies it. And did you hear the one about the comedian and the House Speaker? Apparently it wasn't very funny. Speaker Paul Ryan and his 13 and 15-year-old sons ran into Seth Rogen, said they were fans and wanted a picture. Rogen then went on The Late Show and recounted how he properly shut them down. Watch.
And I said, no way, man. And I said, furthermore, I hate what you're doing to the country at this moment, and I count the days till you no longer have one iota of the power that you currently have.
Rogen then told Stephen Colbert that it wasn't the fault of Ryan's kids, but they should assume if they like a movie or a song that the person who made it probably doesn't like their dad. Shannon.
Okay, Trace. Thank you very much from the left coast.
Sure.
Well, Roseanne Barr breaks down in tears during her first interview since ABC canceled the hit revival of her show after a tweet that was aimed at former Obama advisor Valerie Jarrett. Many viewed it as overtly racist.
I horribly regret it. Are you kidding? I've lost everything. And I regretted it before I lost everything. And I said to God, I am willing to accept whatever consequences this brings because I know I've done wrong.
Joining us now, America's rabbi and longtime Roseanne Barr friend, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. Thanks for being with us tonight, Rabbi.
Thank you for having me, Shannon.
She was obviously very emotional in this interview you had with her. She says she's lost everything. She sounded very remorseful, too, and said she knows that she's going to have a price to pay.
Well, a lot of people are commenting on the death of civility in America, but maybe more consequential is the death of forgiveness. Here you have a woman that is quite well known, prepared to show such extreme vulnerability, extreme anguish, emotional brokenness, almost begging to be forgiven for something that she acknowledges was a terrible error. And she has said it over and over and over again. And I think it's time that we just allowed her to make restitution and rectification for what she did, because we have to be a forgiving people. I mean, it was Martin Luther King, who she says is her idol in this podcast, who said that those who are bereft of forgiveness are also bereft of love, and we must be a much more forgiving nation.
She talked a lot about how she has African-American children in her family and family members, and that she's not a racist. She said that she wasn't thinking of Valerie Jarrett in those terms, wasn't sure of her race, didn't know her race. What do you make of those explanations? You've known her a long time.
Well, I've known Roseanne for almost 2 decades. I've never heard her utter an iota of racism. I've never heard of a scintilla of bigotry come out of her mouth. We all know that Roseanne is a provocateur. We all know that Roseanne does things with elbows that could upset people, but I've never heard real prejudice or bigotry. So you have to put things in context. And what kind of shocks me is, you know, we recorded this about a month ago, and we did not release it because I felt that she needed to reflect on what she had said. It was very vulnerable, very emotional, and that she had to be comfortable with it. And she finally made the decision that, yes, it could be released. And it's made a very big impact because I think the moral courage she showed to take full responsibility and asking people not to defend her. Yes, she does offer explanations as to what happened, but she doesn't offer excuses as to what happened. She said that she was wrong. She takes full responsibility, and she's paid a huge price. Let me also say that she gained nothing by releasing this interview because her show was already canceled. ABC a few days ago already announced that they're replacing her show with something called The Connor. Her character has been written out of the show. So the only thing she gains is to restore her credibility on the value system that she believes in, which in this case is Judaism, the Jewish faith. She takes the Torah very seriously, and that has been kind of the mainstay of our friendship, studying the Torah, and she wanted to assert her values, that all people are created in the image of God, as the book of Genesis says in its very first chapter.
Yeah, I know that she talks about repentance, remorse, and recompense, and having to work through each of those things. We've all probably been there at some point in our lives. We've also seen in America a lot of people who get a second, third, fourth, fifth chance. We'll wait and see if this interview has an impact and how it plays out. Rabbi, thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Shannon. I hope we all just have more heart and more forgiveness.
We're all going to need it at some point. Thank you, sir. Our U.S. sanctions are reportedly having a major effect on Iran's economy and leading to anti-government protests in Tehran. That story and more in our World News Roundup. And Italy's new government takes a stand against migrants by taking their views straight. Same day, critics of the aggressive White House trade policy are pointing to Harley-Davidson shifting some productions of its motorcycles to the European Union to avoid EU tariffs. The steel furnace at Liberty Steel Mill in Georgetown, South Carolina, firing up for the first time in 3 years today. Now, the mill was bought by a British firm trying to get around President Trump's steel tariffs. And that means up to 300 new American jobs. That's according to the company. Time now for Where in the World. White House senior advisor Jared Kushner joining Middle East envoy Jason Greenblatt on a swing through the Middle East, visiting Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Kushner says he's eager to pursue a peace deal with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, but told the Al-Quds newspaper he questions the Palestinian Authority president's commitment to completing such a deal. Tehran's Grand Bazaar shut down today as merchants joined thousands in the streets, clashing with police who fired tear gas. They're protesting soaring prices and the plummeting value of Iran's currency. The unrest broadening as sanctions take a toll on the economy there, restored after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal. And a 24-hour strike nearly paralyzing Argentina. The country's largest labor union protesting the strings attached to a $50 billion International Monetary Fund loan intended to rescue the collapsing peso. They're also calling for 30% pay hikes in line with Argentina's soaring inflation rates. Well, 3 years after a large influx of migrants and asylum seekers hit European soil, the issue is pitting leaders against each other. And Italy's new